Do you really have to tell your child that they're donor conceived? Yes. Yes, you do. Let's talk about it, because what's up? My name is Laura, and I'm your donor conceived person of TikTok. This is unfortunately still a topic of conversation. It's still something that is being debated, even though I'd say it's been pretty wildly accepted both by medicine and by society that you have to tell your child that they're donor conceived. There are still pockets of recipient parents that we're finding around the world who just don't want to tell their child that they're donor conceived. They don't want to tell their child that they're donor conceived for many reasons. One, they think it's not their child's business. They don't need to know. They don't want their child to feel different. It's none of their business, and it really doesn't affect them. All of this is just factually incorrect. So let's just go through it. Here are my top 5 reasons why you have to tell your child that they're donor conceived. 1, lying to your kids is bad. That's been kind of proven throughout time in society and with parenting that lying to your children usually doesn't work out in your favor. Kind of irreparably affects their trust, especially when you're lying to them about something that involves their very cells and DNA. Don't lie to your kids. Number 2, it is their right to know because it built their bodies. I've heard so many recipient parents go like, well, it was my donor conception. It's not the child's business. It wasn't their donor conception. Sure, that was your donor conception, but it built the child's body. The donor conception affects the child more than anyone else in the situation. They are affected by every single choice you make more than you are. They have every right to know. The donor is 50% of their DNA. They need to know, which leads me to number 3. It is dangerous to not tell your child that they're donor conceived. Your child needs to know that one of their raising parents is not a biological parent, or both of the raising parents if you have a double donor conceived child or an embryo donated conceived child. If you are not the genetic parent of that child, then your child doesn't share your medical history. They don't gain your family medical history through osmosis. The same thing goes for egg donor conceived children. Just because you carried the child does not mean they absorbed your family medical history. And that isn't to downplay how big of a deal it is that you carried the child, but that still doesn't make it your genetic child, and facts matter, knowledge matters, and the truth matters, and your child's medical health matters. Let me give you some examples. When you go to the doctor, what do? They always ask, what's your medical history? Do you have a family history of cancer, heart disease, high blood pressure? If you go to a psychiatrist, do you have a family history of mental illness? Your child needs to be equipped with the answer that I am donor conceived. So that means I am missing half of my medical history. Now, I know some recipient parents are going to immediately snap back and say, but I have a donor profile. I have the medical history. The donor was completely, perfectly healthy, so there is nothing to worry about. Therefore, there is no missing medical history that they have to worry about. That's not how medical history works. Your donor most likely donated between the ages of 19 to 25 because the cryobank's favorite place to go find donors is college campuses. Let's have a real honest moment here. How many college kids do you know who actually factually and accurately know their family medical history? Also, how much does your family medical history change from the time when you are 19 to the time when you are 40 years old? You can be diagnosed with a plethora of genetic illnesses that you as the parent and as the donor conceived person will have absolutely no access to. You will not get updates to. But the cryobank said that the donor can update their medical history at any time and will get updated. You understand that the donor doesn't have to. They're not contractually obligated to. Your donor or your donor's family could get diagnosed with a plethora of life-threatening genetic illnesses and you will never find out. That is why it is important for your child to go into the doctor's office and say, I am missing half of my medical history. When I have done that, that typically leads the doctors to do more testing. Letting your doctors know that you just don't know doesn't close doors. It opens doors to ensure that your child is going to get screened for things in a proper way. Number 4, your child is going to find out anyway. Most donor-conceived children nowadays find out they're donor-conceived at some point in their life. Now, obviously, yes, so many donor-conceived people have been finding out with DNA tests such as 23andMe, Ancestry, MyHeritage, GEDmatch. They take it for fun and then they get a massive surprise. But there's also so many other ways your child might accidentally find out. One is a drunken, pissed off aunt at New Year's. The amount of relatives that have spilled the beans has been endless. But maybe you didn't tell a single other soul. Medical emergencies is another way that the child ends up finding out. Your child finds out that they are different blood type than you and your partner. You're not the right kidney match. Anything like that ends up revealing that, donor conceived. There's just so many ways in which somebody can find out that they're donor conceived, and it's much better that it comes from their parents intentionally telling them. And number 5, letting your child know that they're donor conceived lets them know that they are at a greater risk for accidental incest. Donor conceived people are finding out that they have 20, 50, 100, 200, 300 siblings. Donor conceived people have been finding out later in life that they were next door neighbors with their sibling. They went to high school with their sibling. They were childhood best friends with their sibling. They had a crush on their sibling. Their sibling and them dated the same person. And yes, we have had cases of accidental incest in our community. This is a very real thing. Your child needs to be aware of this before they enter the dating market. Before I married my husband, before we got engaged, we took a DNA test. It's a very common precaution for donor-conceived people to DNA test their partners. Because you need to remember, in the United States, there is no cap on how many babies can be made from one donor. Cryobanks for years have been making these utterly massive sibling pods and just, making our gene pool more shallow with every single year that passes. Now, those are just your basic 101 reasons as to why you need to tell your child that they're donor-conceived, but I will give you an extra one. I have now watched so many donor-conceived people find out later in life that they are donor-conceived, and it utterly fractures their relationship with their parents. I have now watched so many donor-conceived people go no contact with their parents over this. If you genuinely value the relationship that you have with your child, you need to tell them and be honest. It is absolutely their right to know, and they need to know. You need to be honest with yourself. You're not telling your child because you're trying to protect them. You're not telling them because you are insecure, and you've let that insecurity fester and get really toxic. There is not one single good ethical reason as to not tell your child that they are donor conceived. Now, it was common practice for doctors in like the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s to tell their patients, never tell your child that they're donor conceived. That they never need to know. Now, most doctors absolutely never tell their patient that. That is pretty much wildly understood within the fertility industry and the medical community that no, your child needs to know that they are donor conceived in the same way that your child needs to know that they are adopted, because you just shouldn't lie to your kids about their genetic origins. Now, if you have a doctor or a counselor who tells you that, you don't need to tell your child that they're donor conceived, that's a red flag. That's not somebody who's doing good donor conception practices. And I'd be concerned if that's what they're telling their patients. I would be very concerned as to what other good practices they are not doing as well. And please hear this from a donor conceived person who was made from donor sperm, who is arguably one of the most loud and obnoxious donor conceived advocates out there. Finding out that I was donor conceived never once changed how I looked at my dad. Never once. There was never a moment, an inkling in my life, even when him and I were fighting, to yell at him, "But you're not my real dad." That was never something that even occurred to me to say. He's my dad. If you are physically and emotionally there for your child will know who their parents are. Are you the one picking them up from school? Are you the one that's baking cupcakes with them? Are you the one that's making dinner with them, doing arts and crafts, helping them with their homework, making sure that they brush their teeth, doing activities together on the weekends? Then your kid knows who their parents are. So do what parents are supposed to do. Show your child unconditional love and put their needs above your own comfort. And I promise, once you do it, you're going to realize, that wasn't so scary. You got this.